Hello and welcome to Reiki Women Podcasts. And it's me and Michaela. So I'm Bronwyn. I should have said that, shouldn't I? Michaela Daystar from Heartscapes. Hello, Michaela. And me from Reiki with Bronwyn. Now, Carrie's not here. She's traveling in Japan, so lucky girl. And we will hear more about that probably maybe the next podcast, I'm guessing. So for the moment, Michaela and I are going to have a chat together, and we're going to chat about integration. And we have already spoken a little bit about integration in a previous podcast in terms of how to weave the system of Reiki into our daily lives. So integrating it in that sense. But how about integrating the practices, everything that you learn in yourself? So how do you go about that? Do we need to, I don't know. There's so many different ways of learning the system of Reiki. You can pay $15 and go online and get a piece of paper. And I'm not saying that's how you learn the system of Reiki. I'm just saying that's what's being offered. So how would you integrate that? I actually don't know. And then there's, the traditional, but, we tend to, when I first started, there was a lot of just, like a 2-day course, sort of concept for the level 1, for example. And there's lots of permutations of that these days for different reasons. And one of the reasons is because of integration. So we're trying to, all of us, all the teachers out there are trying to find ways to help students to integrate the system of Reiki into their lives and really get the most out of it, become a better person. I mean, that's why we're doing it, isn't it? And ultimately, being a better person, and then for those who are professionals, wanting to be better practitioners, wanting to be better teachers. So let's see what we can come up with some ideas on, how we might be able to help you with that. Michaela, I know you've got lots of ideas about this.
Yeah, it's something that I think about a lot in a lot of different contexts. I love that you've kind of named a few different ways in which we could even just think about the word or the concept of integration. For me, like where I start has a lot to do with the conversation that we had a while back about ritual and about part of the role and the function of ritual traditionally and in current times is to help us navigate a liminal space, a period where we are moving, from something and into something else, and we're not quite there yet. And there's this liminal space, this in-between space that our modern culture is not well suited to give us time for. We often are expected to move right from one thing into the next without that period of transition in between. In fact, there's, a lot of instances of being shamed for taking too much time to, really take on a new role, for example, or to learn something, or to just be with something like grief or something like change. And so there's this need for integration time, right? Because another way of thinking about the liminal space is that it's the time when we're integrating the change that we're experiencing. Something has happened, something has changed, whether we've initiated that ourselves or it's just happened to us or it's part of our natural growth as a person, or we've learned a new practice like the system of Reiki, or we've had a really powerful, healing experience or traumatic experience, and there's this time that opens up where we need to metabolize, in a sense, what we've experienced, and that is integration. And we just don't honor that space well, I think, in our kind of modern Western society. And so it really feels incumbent upon all of us as individuals and communities to insist on that, right? And so that's kind of in the general, in our lives in general. In terms of the system of Reiki, an obvious example that you've already named is when we learn the system to begin with, when we take a class, or we have a session, and we have this powerful experience and we learn new things and we experience new things and we practice new things that we've learned. And then are we just good to go after that weekend class? We've learned it all, we've experienced it all, and now we can just bam, we've got Reiki in our life? Or do we need time to digest it, to move through, let the ideas percolate into our mind, let the experiences that we've had integrate into our body, let our energy work with what we have been working with. And so, as a teacher and a practitioner, that's something that I'm often planning for and designing for. And it's something that I feel like I've grown a lot in, and I've seen our community in general grow a lot in. I'm now seeing much more people, when they talk about the structures that they've created for a Reiki class or an immersive experience, taking into account that period of time after, and how can we support, or how can we extend the learning experience to hold that period of integration time. I don't think it's quite enough for me, speaking for me and what I'm choosing to do as a teacher, to teach a class in an intensive way and then, suggest a practice regimen, and then suggest that our students do that for 21 days. There's this 21-day integration period that's often included, and then expect the students to be on their own with that, to be outside of community with that, to be outside of mentorship with that. That didn't work well for me as a learner, and I've seen it not work well for people that I've worked with. So that's I think an obvious starting point, right? How do we create learning experiences, experiences where people are taking on the system of Reiki into their lives for the first time or for not the first time? And then how do we continue to hold the container of that learning after the time? Or do we extend that learning over a longer period of time to account for that? And ultimately, that's what I decided to do, to take my weekend classes, extend them into an 8-week or a 12-week for Shimpiden experience, where each week there's a period of integration with whatever we learned that week that's supported. And then between the classes, there is a period of integration that is supported. So I think that's the first layer. Structurally, how do we hold that? And there's lots of different models for doing that well, right? Like, that's not the only way to do it well. And that's one of the things that's been really interesting to me lately, is learning the different structures that people are developing to do that well. The layer after that maybe we can circle back to, is what's actually happening inside of us. What actually is integration, right? Like, what is happening when we're in that integration period? So maybe we'll circle back to that layer of the question, but I'd love to hear from you, Bronwyn, kind of on that structural level. What makes sense to you around that?
Well, I did just write some notes as you were talking, and the cat has sat on them. So I'll just have to use my brain and actually remember what I said, what I thought.
Because heaven forbid we should remove a cat from their chosen seat, right? It is not done. It's just not done.
I hate relying on my memory. Oh, anyway.
Yeah,
look, I understand, and I'm sure every Reiki teacher understands what you're talking about, because, or even just anyone who does Reiki, because so often you'll come across people and they'll say things like, oh yeah, when they ask you what you do or whatever, and they go, oh yeah, I do Reiki, or I did Reiki, but they actually have no connection to what they're talking to, because it was something that they did once and it's just disappeared into the ether, and it's certainly not a part of their life at all, right? So you can see that the way that the system is working is not working. Yeah. And as you say, that support or whatever it is that, like, for example, if someone is practicing Tai Chi, they're practicing Tai Chi, right? You don't go, oh, I'm a Tai Chi practitioner, if you don't do it, because you know that you have to do the practice to be a Tai Chi practitioner. Yeah. I personally, over the years, and so much recently, I'm quite disenchanted with this idea of Reiki 1, Reiki 2, Reiki 3, right? And I know that that's how, well, probably not in the beginning, it wasn't actually how it was, but how it was formulated to make it an accessible sort of system for people to pass on, I guess, right? But yeah, I feel like it's very difficult to people get very like fixated on this idea. Well, I've done that, and then I've done that, and then I've done that, and that's that. And for me, that doesn't feel like what this is about. And I would much prefer not to teach even in that way, possibly. I don't know. I'm still thinking about it at the moment. That's why I sort of went into this idea of coaching, with the
Yeah.
idea, and I love that. I love it, right? So, but the thing is that basically people sort of already need to have studied some Reiki, yeah, so some part of the system, like done a Reiki 1 class or whatever. And then, this idea of coaching, of just being there and moving with that student into what area they need at that time. And I really do love that. And it feels really organic, and it's more real. It's actually supporting people in the moment now with what they have to do, and where they feel they're at, and what information. And that's the blessing of having done something like this for 25 years, that you have a lot of knowledge, and it's a great thing to be able to sit back into that. Mind you, I'm always learning. Every week I'm studying, learning, trying to find out new things, and to make myself a better teacher. But you can sit back into aspects of, you know of the information that you do know, and you can help people with that. And I love that. I that's I It's something that I get a lot of joy and yeah, out of.
Yeah, it seems like that coaching, Reiki coaching offering is so much about integration, right? It's like you've learned it in some capacity, and
Yeah.
now, let me support you and walk with you in taking that into your life and following your own threads on what that means and what that looks like, and do that in a supportive container. And I love that option because I just don't see that sort of a thing available,
No, because
really.
we're hooked on this idea. It's Reiki 1, 2, or 3, right?
Right, exactly.
And yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the I like that you call out the limitations in dividing up this learning in that way, in a way that is, convenient, and also perhaps a little bit arbitrary. And what I'm finding with working through these levels in a year program,
Yeah.
with these, taking each one of them, extending them over time, giving these guided, supported integration periods in between the classes, is that it's starting to naturally blend and be more, a continuum rather than a, fixed here, here, and here. For example, I had a student in the cohort that we're midway through Okuden right now. And in Shoden, it was very clear that it was beneficial for them to start working with Chokore and with the symbol, first symbol. So I just taught her that. It was just like there was no reason to make her wait until we got to that material in the order that I have it written in my curriculum, weeks away, right? And inside of each class, there's this fluency of like circling around the material. We'll be in Okuden and we're calling back things that we learned weeks and weeks and weeks ago in Shoden, and bringing those forward and swirling them around in this new place that we're in. So there's this organic blending of the curriculum
Yeah.
that it feels, probably much closer to that more apprenticeship style, where you're meeting the student where they are,
Yeah.
and taking them where they need to go at their pace. So I really love that aspect, and it feels like a way to bring integration along with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I liked what you said about time, And it is so funny. Our society really is this thing, like, has this thing about time that, we are restricted by it, constricted by it, and we need to race against time. And something like this isn't really about time. And I guess one of the things that I was interested in when we decided to talk about this was about when people come to the system of Reiki, they all come to it with themselves, and each self is different.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what you were just saying about, teaching someone symbol one, right? And when you weren't teaching the other people, because everyone comes to something differently, and they come to it bringing, some people. I recently had a student, and she's about the same age as me, and she came to the class with such wisdom and such, you know she was so on point with everything. I didn't feel like I was really teaching anything. I was just sort of like being there, just going through it, just, and it was sort of because she just had it all. And I thought, well, it's so different to some people who come, and they just have, perhaps they have no idea what they're going to do. They don't really know much about anything, and which is great too. I mean, I'm not really saying that one is better than the other. I'm just saying that it's very different, and we're all quite different how we come to something. So I guess that idea that we're throwing these people into like a class and going, this is how we do it, da da da, can be restrictive, yeah, for some people. And it, as a teacher, you've got to be quite fluid and flexible, obviously, with that, and work with people. But if it's a short class, that can be more difficult, obviously. The thing that I also thought about when you were talking about time was, there isn't there that saying that it takes, and this is so human, that we actually, someone's worked this out, takes 10,000 hours to truly integrate something, right?
Right.
Now, my thoughts on that are a couple of things. Like, yeah, who the hell sat down and worked that out? I mean, that's just so us in our heads, right? Crazy.
Right.
And but also, I imagine, it's true that it just takes a very, very long time, however many hours, 10,000 hours is, to integrate something. And we, that's what I was saying about life, having done something for a long time, you do start to sit back into that, and it does become more, I guess, a part of you. It becomes easier to it's like when we start a new job. The first day on a new job can be so scary, the first week, the first month, because we don't really know what we're doing or how to do it. And by the time, we just need to give over to that and really be a learner.
Yeah.
There's another point to that, just one thing that I have to say. That was the very first thing that I thought about on this subject was beginner's mind. And it is something that we have to hold close to us, because it's not, because giving us a piece of paper saying that we've done a class, a certificate or whatever, it doesn't mean anything within the system of Reiki. So it's all very nice, but it doesn't mean anything. And we always need to step back into that beginner's mind and just always be learning. And learning means to have an open mind, an open heart, and to have the vitality and energy for something.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to circle back to that piece around having the vitality and the energy, but kind of pitching back to your point around time, you know, and taking our time to meet students where they are and travel with them where they need to go. How can we possibly get to know them that well in a 2-day class?
Yeah.
Like we can't get to understand who they are, where they're at, what they need, where they need to go, and they don't have time to communicate that to us in such a short container. So that was the one piece. But to your point around energy and having the energy to really bring this alive in our life and to stay in beginner's mind, we really need to talk about the other side of that, which is rest. And for me, integration time has everything to do with rest and
Yeah.
with balancing our cycles of activity and doing and resting.
Yeah.
Back when I did the 2 day classes, the 3 day classes, we would always build in nap time, what we called nap time. And we would literally pull blankets out and we would give people pillows and we would have them like lie down and literally take a nap for like 10 minutes. And we would do that, once or twice during the class. And the purpose of that was that, we know cognitively,
Yeah.
from what we know about the brain, that the brain needs to like when the learning comes into our actual being is when we're resting. And so, we can learn and learn and learn and study and study and study, but we don't actually have that knowledge until we have rested with it and until we have allowed our, subconscious to work it, to do whatever it's doing with it behind the scenes to like, weave it into the fabric of our mind and weave it into the fabric of our bodies. And so rest is incredibly important. And so again, giving enough spaciousness to integrate rest, not
Mhm.
only after the thing has happened, right? Be sure to get plenty of rest after that 2 day class, but in the midst of it. And so, and that really came clear to me after the first time I taught the year program. And we did the integration time between Shoden and Okuden. It's a month. And when we came back in Okuden, one of my students, I felt so sad. I felt so bad about this. She's like, I'm not sure if I integrated well enough because I wasn't able to, work hard enough and like practice diligently enough and be doing all the things every day enough. Like she was feeling guilty about
Yeah.
that. And I was like, oh no. Like the integration period is about practicing what we've learned, but even more so, it's about resting and it's about being still and it's about following our own body and mind and spirits, directions about what we need. And so I was like, all right, I need to teach that way differently the next
Yeah.
time because it's not because in her mind, this is go time, right? Okay, I learned the things in my 8 week class and now it's go time. I got to do all the things and I got to go hard and I got to go 0 to 60 and I got to do, it's
Yeah.
like that mentality that we have where we don't give ourselves the liminal space. We don't give ourselves the in between. It's just go time. Like once
Yeah.
you finish the thing. So I was like, all right, we need to slow this way down and talk about even this time of integration in a whole different way.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I totally agree. And I see that as so talking about doing, whenever I talk about doing, I always feel a little bit bad because there's this sort of idea that, Reiki is being. And it's like, oh, doing, being, doing, being. But of course, the two of these things come together as dual elements, right? And we can see them as, a relative truth. So we need the two of them to create this sense of balance and wholeness and non-duality. Also, they sit within that dual concept of form and no form. I think that's probably a good way to see it. That, the form, we need both of those things. And I often sort of, for me, I think the no form can be more important, but probably that's probably even wrong to say that, but it could be more important because we're sitting in the vibration of the work. So we do the work and then we sit into that and we, exactly what you were just saying, we allow that to integrate, we allow that to work its way out inside of us, whatever needs to happen and shift or sit. Yeah. And so yeah, the form being the practice, the actual doing sort of aspect, and the no form being the being, and together creating that sense of a whole practice, a whole being. There was something else and now I've forgotten. Yeah, it's gone.
Yeah, well, we can call it back from the ether, right? It's integrating in you. It's going to come through when it needs to. Um, but I wanted to bring it also down to kind of the microcosm of even our individual practice, right? So for those of you listening who have a practice, whether it's Reiki or some other practice that calls on you to focus your attention in a concerted way for a period of time and to really be with a particular whatever it is. That even in that kind of small container of a 15-30 minute practice, we still want to give ourselves a piece of integration before we step back out into our day, right? And I love the way that, I've learned to practice from you and from other teachers, where you finish the visualization or the practice or the chanting or the whatever that you're doing, and then you sit and you rest for a few moments.
Yeah.
And even if that's a few breaths or a minute or 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever proportion it is, it's that closing piece where we're still in our practice time, but right now we're just resting.
Yeah.
And I think that's such an important part
Yeah.
of any practice. I mean, in yoga, you have savasana, right? You get to the end and you let your body let it all go and you rest, right? So there's structures that exist in certain practices that just aren't there in other contexts. And so I think you know, a takeaway that I would love folks to have from this is to really be paying attention to what degree, how much you do or do not give yourself periods of rest and integration after you experience, learn, strive for, put in a lot of effort around anything, right? Whether that's physical, mental, spiritual, emotional effort. It's really, really essential. And I mentioned early on, even grieving, right? That is an emotional effort, right? Are we giving ourselves rest inside of that, a time period like that, if we're experiencing that? A great celebration, right? You have a great celebration. You need to rest afterwards, right? So I think that's a really important piece of this. And then for those of us who are designing experiences for other people to come through or for ourselves, like a class or like a retreat, are you building times of rest and integration into that time? I was just sitting down with my colleagues. We've actually recently kind of decided to make a formal collaboration. There's four of us who all work in different modalities, but we're operating together under the Heartscapes Healing Arts Collective. And so we're planning our first retreat as a collective. And we're talking about that we have all these things that we want to do, all these amazing activities we want people to do, but like, hey, be sure that we leave those periods of spaciousness, those periods of rest and integration. Because I've certainly been through experiences that there was really amazing things happening, but they were happening the whole time. And you get to the end of it and you're just exhausted. You're like, oh, I don't even know what just happened. It was just too much, and you get to that point where you're even feeling a little resentful about like, oh, this amazing full moon thing that we have to go do that I'm so exhausted I don't even want to do. So I think, that was really part of what was on my mind when this topic came up is how important and, not difficult ultimately it is to consider building in that time and space for integration at whatever scale we're dealing with. A 20-minute personal practice, a 5-day retreat, a year-long program, whatever it is, building in that spaciousness.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I was just thinking, I did I was attending an online thing. It was a Qigong thing, and they had all these different practices. It was exactly what you're saying. I ended up doing one of the workshops. I thought I was going to do all these practices. I was so excited, but they were all one after the other it was impossible. How would you do that? You can't do that. So
Right.
I know exactly what you're saying as far as that goes. And yeah, but I was also thinking, I remember what it was before that I forgot, and that was the word seiza. So when we sit, in the Japanese style where you sit to meditate and you sit back on your, you kneel down, you sit back on your haunches, I guess, yeah. Then that's called seiza, and the translation of seiza means to sit still. It doesn't mean to do anything.
Right.
So, we often think, I guess, about in our practice that we're doing. And this comes back to, I guess, what I was talking about before, that there is time where we just sitting, we can just sit. And some people might think that that's not, that nothing is happening and we're not doing anything. Yeah. But we are resting in a way, aren't we? We're sitting in a position that helps our body to be in its best posture. So physically, posture is great. The breath can move freely, easily through the body, the energy, and the mind is settled and calm at the hara, So sitting like that, it is to sit still and to really just to be in the moment and the time, and not actively trying to do anything,
Yeah.
and how beneficial that can be.
You talking about that alongside your absolutely magnificent feline, like giving us a nice, beautiful headshot, really
He's
made something come up for me that kind of clicked. One of the things that I've tried to work through, like understanding about myself and how to best be with this aspect of myself, it's something I've always called my lion energy. And what that means to me is that how I tend to operate is I'll have these bursts of speed, right? These bursts of energy. It's often creative energy or productive energy where I can do the things that I need to get done. That's when I, get a lot of my writing done, or I do a bunch of yard work, or I clean the house, or whatever needs to be done. I've got this burst of energy. And when it's done, it's this long period of rest. And so, the way that a big cat would operate, right? That burst of
yeah,
energy to hunt, and then they eat, and then it's integration time, right? Digestion time, right? Integration and digestion, very, very similar concepts in terms of how I'm thinking about it. And so, we all have different levels of need around this. So I am a person who needs long periods of integration, digestion, and rest. And in those periods, and those periods might be hours, usually days, sometimes weeks, you know. And it does not work well inside of our
yeah.
like culture of productivity, right? It did not work well when I was a full-time employee for a college, for example. I would be very productive and very creative for periods of time, and then I would be very slow. Did not work well. And it doesn't always work well working for myself, right? Because I don't have a boss like putting pressure on me. And so I'll go into these long periods of integration where I'm just sitting in my garden and I'm just like observing. And what I've come to learn is that integration is what's happening. And it's when ideas start to come forward and like things that happened before, like I remember, and they start like meaning making starts happening. And
Yeah,
what I've learned is that it's this incredibly fertile time that's absolutely necessary for the
absolutely.
productivity time,
Yeah,
right? It's where the ingredients come from. Like, it's where the juice comes from. But I spent so many years of my life in so much judgment of myself because I felt like I was just lazy. Like I'm just a lazy person because I go through these like slow spells, like and these like I don't want to do it spells. And it's been really healing for me to reclaim that and say, I'm not a lazy person. My natural rhythm cycle does not work well with the 40-hour work week. Like it just does not,
yeah,
and that's okay, because when I'm in a really productive space, amazing things happen. It's just a challenge that I have to figure out how to still accomplish the things that I need to accomplish. And so, what occurs to me is that our needs for integration and for rest are going to vary quite a bit from person to person. And knowing what our particular rhythm is around that, how quickly we digest and metabolize information and experiences, thoughts, ideas, inspiration is a really valuable thing to know about ourselves. And it's a valuable thing to know about each other, right? Because somebody might be in a
that's right.
rest period or a super productive period, and that might look differently to us if we don't understand it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that just came up looking at your kitty. It reminded me of lion energy and the talk about Seiza and the like the active resting, right, that Cesar invites us into, right? We're putting our body into a particular posture for a reason, and then we're just being there with it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's lovely. Oh, well, maybe I'll go and do that. I think I need a bit of a pause. So thank you very much, Michaela, for bringing up that subject. It was great. I really enjoyed that. And thank you for tying it all together there at the end.
There's one more thing that I wanted to say.
Yeah.
You just led us in our monthly embodying Reiki practitioner
Hmm.
circle. And another meaning of integration kind of came through as I was reflecting on that really beautiful experience that you led us in, where you took us through each of the 5 precepts, aligning them with elements from nature. For me, that was an experience of integrating the precepts in a new way, right? Like that particular piece of learning, super critical piece of learning from the system of Reiki. And one of the other participants commented on this, that they were experiencing it in an embodied way, in a way that they never had before. It was being integrated into
Yeah.
our bodies and our imaginations and our minds in a way that is different than other ways of working with them. And so I love that that practice space, becomes a place where we get to kind of workshop these things and like figure out how can we integrate these conversations that we have in the podcast in real time with people. And so I very much appreciated how you chose to navigate that. And I really look forward to seeing what Carrie's going to come up with for us next month. And for those of you who might be interested in joining us, there will always be information down below on how to do that.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, just about the precepts, it's interesting, isn't it? Just that embodiment of things. The reason why I did that practice in alignment with the elements was because we talked about nature. But the other thing is that people are always asking me, and I see it in students. There's this sort of quizzical thing of like, okay, I've got these precepts, but what the hell do I do with them? And
How do
so
I take them off the page of this
yeah.
nice list of nice things, okay, into my actual life, right?
Hmm.
Integrate it into my actual life. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was such a
interesting.
valuable practice.
Hmm. All right. Well, thank you very much. And okay, we'll be heading off now. So we'll see you next week. And until then, have a lovely time. Lots of love.
I love you. Bye.